My name is Lance Best, and I'm in Auckland, New Zealand. I'm speaking with Brian Cardoza, born in Anchorage, Alaska, and now in North Carolina, Louisiana. Brian, you'll like this. I cannot say anything to you that is worse than you've already heard or done to you. All right? Now, I take a shower with all my guests in the morning, and it's there that my creativity flows, so thick and fast. The questions I'm going to ask you today came to me so easily with you. It just comes, and it's almost like someone wants me to ask these questions. So that's one of my ways of preparing. Now, Brian describes himself as a victim survivor, thriver, and giver. Sold into sex trafficking at the age of 6 years old till 9. Physically beaten and severely mentally abused till 15. Now a speaker, survivor, international artist, and author of The Unexpected Victim. Brian, tell me what you mean by thriver.
So thriver in the traditional sense, Lance, means more good days than bad days. So when I was just in the survivor mode, I would spend an enormous amount of time stuck on a red beanbag, or constantly being reminded about what happened to me as a child. When I got to the point of thriver is when I started to realize that for the last week I hadn't thought about it. Then it gets to the point where you're like, holy crap, I haven't thought about it. And then all of a sudden it's like you make up for lost time because you spend about 2 or 3 days just obsessed about it. You either start drinking again or you start doing something else to make yourself forget. And then you come back out of it. Well, thriver to me, Lance, was I would go like 2 weeks and I'd be like, I hadn't thought about it at all. And when I would start to think about it, I wouldn't need a drink. I wouldn't need a drug. I wouldn't need a distractionary course for me to survive the next couple of days. It was literally like, no, okay, my therapist said I should do this, or my sports specialist said I should do this, so on and so forth. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like I can relive some of this stuff. And yes, I will still experience PTSD. I will still experience social anxiety, but it's not debilitating. And so to me, that's what being a thriver is when you have more good days than bad.
Wow, yes. It's made it clearer for me, because I think it's what you intended behind it. That's why I asked. Brian, I want to describe you now, Brian. Now, I don't know you. This is the first time I've met you. I do, for certain reasons, have some intuition about things. This is how I want to describe you, because I have a better description for you based on what I know from the internet. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Brian is a genial giant who has survived through more traumatic experiences than most people survived. Come out the other end, found his way back, and now he uses his experiences to help others facing difficult life situations. How does that sound?
Good. I am in the midst of still writing a play, and the play's name is Redefining Giants. So it's funny that you're saying that. It's a play where it's a single one-man play where we discuss the verb giant and what actually substantiates the term. I know some people. I have a very strong survivor, Michael Broussard, Shane Mills, all these people that are smaller than me that went through some horrendous things. But I can promise you, if you ever met him, you'd be like, yeah, that's a giant. That guy, that human being is larger than life. And so I've always wanted to, just because I am ginormous as a human being, I always felt it was compelled to challenge that definition.
I just see it as powerful. It's
Yeah.
not, I can really connect with what you went through. Certainly, I've had my own experiences, and I just look at your bio that you sent me because I got it late last night. You wrote, "We become a superhero," writes adult Brian Cardoza in a letter to his 6-year-old self. "We are mighty little one," and it's funny that should come to me because I've got a little note on here that I wrote a couple of days ago. I must do something about my inner child, because and I understand that the same as I do, that we grow up and in the first few years that there's that child, that beautiful child, and then we spend the rest of our lives protecting it, or it protects us. Because that's how we learn to survive, because it protects us, and we do what we have to do. So that really spoke to me there.
Well, Lance, in the last page of my book, The Unexpected Victim, is the letter, and it's really kind of cool because in that letter, so I sent it to my editor, and my editor was like, "Okay, so you want this to be the last page?" I was like, "Yes." It's like, "Well, do you want us to do edits?" And I was like, "No, I want that as raw as I wrote it. I don't want, if you guys add a comma, I am upset." And they were like, "Gotcha," because I wanted it raw. I wanted it to look like exactly how it felt coming out. And in the book, in the letter I write to myself, like, you have no idea how brave you actually are at 6 years old. You have no idea what you're accomplishing just by waking up and going back to work. Because I've done enough of these to where people will look at me and be like, "Well, why didn't you just leave? Or why didn't you tell somebody?" And I'm always like, well, I was 6 years old. I was isolated by my family, and I was isolated by my rapist. So to me, I didn't know I was being raped. I didn't know I was being abused. To me, it was just Tuesday. And so when I got older and started to intermingle with other people and other friends and saw their nuclear family as dysfunctional, as functional as it was, that's when I started to realize, like, wait a minute, so you didn't vacuum and you weren't beat because you didn't vacuum? Like, and that's when you realize, like, something's not right. And then that's when you realize, this is okay, so I tried to write that letter from the thought process of, at the time, a 40-year-old trying to talk to a 6-year-old with comic book ideation, because growing up, I would read comic books and I would think to myself, like, how great would it be if, like, Wolverine came in and, like, pulled me away from all this, or Captain America came in and made all this bad stuff go away. And guess what? I mean, Wolverine and Captain America never showed up. So I ended up having to, in essence, now that I look back on it, turn myself into the superhero and walk away at 15.
Yeah, I can understand all of that. You put in your bio here, against childhood sexual assault and physical abuse. And I'm just, what stuck out to me straight away was you didn't put mental abuse, because that's worse often than everything else.
Yeah, for me, so when I do my art, or when I write, I do them from the source of what has happened to me. When I do my poetry, it's what I'm going through. So there's like a delineation between the two pieces of art. And for me, the mental abuse is still going on. You know, I always say my mother has the greatest pair of ultra marathon running shoes in the world, because she's constantly doing laps in my head about how much of a failure I am, how worthless I am, how ugly I am, how I'll never be loved, and all these things. So for me, I talk about the mental abuse, and I talk about my mental health issues with the severe PTSD and all that stuff. But I don't really talk about it a lot in regards to that, because it was like something I'm still literally going through. I feel like in a lot of ways, I've kind of come through the other end on the sex abuse and on the physical abuse. The physical abuse was real easy for me. Like the minute my mom would beat me with a broomstick or a coat hanger, and I got so large that it stopped hurting. like it was just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, you know, like I'm good, you know.
Absolutely do know.
Yeah, but the mental abuse is still something that I go through to this day. I'm doing a fasting routine, and I was doing the middle of my cardio, Lance, and it dawned on me the reason why I don't feel like I'm worthy of success or worthy of a lot of things is because I'm heavy. And the reason why that is because I was constantly berated for how big I am. And so it's gotten into this point to where now I have this skipping record in my head that just says, you're fat, you're fat, you're fat. And it overrides the, I want to be successful, I want to do this, or I want to do that, because I have that skipping record. You're fat, you're fat, you're fat. And and that's something that I need to conquer. So that's one of the reasons why I don't bring it up, because I don't feel like I've gotten to a point where I can't.
I think, why I say mental is one of the hardest is because we may never, I know personally I've got stuff, I may never shift. I just have to accept it and continue to work on it. That's why I asked you about mental, because a lot of what I read about you and what you say will help people mentally to get in touch with the stuff that gets in the way. That's why it came up for me here.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've touched on your love for art, and I was going to bring that up. I had a question about that. Have you done much work on the art of drawing? There's a book called The Art of Drawing, actually. Have you done much in that area?
It's kind of funny, because one of the worst beatings I ever got was from my mother, and it was over an art project. And the reason being I got the beating was because this is probably one of the few things I can say about my mother, Lance, that is good. This lady was next level artist, right? You would hand her a picture and she would get a canvas, and you would be hard pressed to figure out which one was the painting and which one was the picture. You know what I mean? Like, she was that good. So when I started picking up drawing and I wasn't nearly as good as her, there was a lot of anger and animosity. And she would, I would draw like these crazy demons and all these kinds of stuff. And she got mad. She was just like, why the hell you always draw demons? And I was just like, well, because they're easy. But in my head, Lance, I'm telling myself, like, that's because that's all I see. Like all I see are demons. So I did drawing till about 9th grade. And then I just stopped. I got kicked out of the house. I was on the streets. I was living on the streets for 2 years in Alaska. Dude, everything I could just to get, a food in my mouth or clothing on my back or a roof over my head. So there was no time to dawdle on drawings. So I stopped for a lot of years. And then when I moved to Boston and got a good job and had a nice, safe home again, I started painting again, and I started drawing again. And I started to find the tranquility of doing pieces like this, where I know you can't see it, but it's one of my favorite pieces.
I can see it.
Yeah. It is, I don't know if you can read it, but
Yeah, yeah, I can.
on the inside, on the inside of it, it's all the things I think about myself. And then on the outside is everything that everybody says about me. And I'm trying to articulate, like, yeah, you guys are saying I'm brave, but I don't think I'm brave. I just think that I tell people that we shouldn't rape each other. That's not a brave statement. That's a sad statement that I have to make it. It's not brave. You know what I mean? Like, it's more sad.
Let me rephrase that for you, because I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
The reality is you are brave, but you don't know it.
Well, yeah, I guess that's what everybody keeps telling me.
And you won't until you can experience it, until you.
Yeah, I think of other guys. I think of other women. I think of, the David Pittmans and the Jason Lees and all these guys that are just out there every day. Greg Holtmeyer every day talking about this and trying to get the world to take notice. And I'm doing the same thing, but I'm doing it from the confines of my home and on a canvas. Like, to me, those guys are brave. To me, I'm just a schlub with a talent.
Hey, come on. I'm gonna put some perspective here. Do you realize how many people don't speak up? That you,
yes.
catalyst for that. And if you don't think that's brave, you don't think that's courageous, you've had to come to terms with who you are. That's a challenge. That's a huge challenge. And you're doing that.
Yeah. And honestly, Lance, that's something on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock I work with my therapist on. Because she's constantly, I almost put a recorder on, because I can just be like, see, Lance says the exact same thing.
Well, hey, another thing about drawing, and I've done some drawing classes, and as far as I'm concerned, you're always communicating. Even if you're not saying anything, not doing anything, you're always communicating. Now,
yeah.
And I'd encourage you to look, I think there's a book called The Art of Drawing, but look into understanding drawing, because there are psychotherapists, therapists, or whatever. They work with drawing. Whatever you draw, even if you know this stuff, you draw what's in you. You can't, whatever you do.
What's really funny is I was going to go to school to become an art therapist. And I went to go sign up at the university, and the day I went to go sign up, Lance, no word of a lie, you can look it up yourself. October 15th last year, 2017, at the community college where I was at to sign up, there was an active gunman on campus, and we got on lockdown for 3 hours. So I'm just like, the hits keep coming. So I wanted to do art therapy, but here in the States, art therapy is right next to a degree in 18th century art. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to have, but look, find it.
Okay. I also pick in your bio that you are still passionate about learning new techniques and styles, and the creative process continuing to. So that's an ongoing journey for you, yeah.
Yeah, and it will be. Even to the point where. So one of the guys that I do a lot of stuff with, Michael Broussard, who, if you ever get a chance to, you should speak with him. He's a voice actor, and his art is really his ability to communicate and articulate a beautiful message. And we do one of my shows in Philadelphia every year, and every year he has all these great speakers, because they're all from a stage presence. And so now my latest thing is working on stage poetry, because it's another art. It's another something that I can get on YouTube and look up for 5 hours, and then get on Wikipedia, and then find like thesaurus is online, and just start doing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden do a haiku. Like,
You notice that I put a couple up things I wrote down because I like playing with words, and I used to do that years ago too.
Yep.
So that and I will get into that later because I did watch your video where you told that poem and everything, and so
Okay.
yeah, we'll get into that. What I want to ask you is I want you to tell me about you before you were 6. Now, the part I'm looking for is the child that you can remember before there was a stain.
So the kid I can remember, it was really kind of weird. My father really didn't want me. I was the thing that had trapped him to this woman that he was literally going to leave. So I was conceived on his return trip from Vietnam, and he didn't want to be with my mom anymore. And he was about ready to walk out the door. And I got this later from him after I got out of jail. And so I got this, torrid tale. And so I really remember like a couple years before I was 6, like 4, 5, 6-ish, early 6. Like for instance, we went to Universal Studios in California. And I'll never forget it because it was actually a funny story, but when you think about it, it was kind of sad. We went on the Jaws tour where you go through and you see the Jaws pops out of the water.
Yeah. I've done that.
Yeah, and so we're on the ride and Jaws pops up. And as soon as Jaws pops up, I jump up and scream because I've just been like, there is a mouth that is the size of me coming at me. And I end up in the gentleman's next to me's lap. And it's kind of a funny story because the guy wasn't expecting a flying 5-year-old. But then you realize that the reason why the gentleman got the flying 5-year-old was because my family were in a different row and they sent me to that row to be by myself. So that's kind of Brian before 6 was there was this Norman Rockwell style painting that people got to see, but they never realized that I was painted last.
But is there a time that you can remember where you were bubbly? Because every child has that sort of nature in the beginning. I'm for a guy who's 6'2" and 400 pounds, this is kind of weird. I'm still kind of bubbly. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I still like to joke around. Yeah. I think for a lot of years, I don't remember that being as a kid, because I was really dealing with a lot of adult situations at a very early age and really had no conceptualization of what it was. So like I was talking to Susan Yoki, who's another fantastic human being. And I was like, I made a joke. I was just like, well, I was 7 years old and I hadn't really learned time management yet. I learned that at 9. And she was just like, oh my God, I would have loved to have learned that at 9. But then it dawned on me, like, a 9-year-old really shouldn't have to learn time management. You know what I mean? Like there should be like no conceptualization of time. But I know that by the time I was 9, I knew that if my brother and my mom were not up by at least 6:47, they were going to be late and I wasn't going to be able to get a meal or get a shower in before I had to go to school. As crazy as that is, I had learned that at that early. So I feel like when I was in my early 30s, Lance, I was I was 6'2", 265 pounds at 4 to 7% body fat. Okay. I was a walking V. I was a monster. And I have like really, really blue eyes. So I make no unadulterated terms. I was a human slut. I was just such, I was everywhere and anywhere. And I feel like I was making up for lost time in my 30s. And, and now I look back on it and realize I just blew so many great opportunities. But I had to be a child at some point.
We've covered a little bit of this already, but what I put here, I asked the question, is there still stuff to let go? And you've already told us that, because I look at your pictures and I see serious, I see happy, I see relaxed, I see nice sky, and occasionally I see the hurt showing quite strongly. And I can really relate to this, Brian. And is there still, well, no, you've answered that really, but what at the moment is the toughest one you're facing to let go of?
Well, you know, the toughest one to let go of is the legacy. Not the legacy of, because, you know, it's a myth about men being molested and they become molesters. That's just a myth. The legacy is that I'm 44 years old. I never had kids because I was scared to death that I was going to be a terrible human being.
That's not too late, Brian. It's not too late.
People keep telling me that. And then I lost some opportunities with some wonderful women because I was not right in the head. You know, I could have had the wife and, you know, the picket fence. So that's something that I still have to deal with on a daily basis. Is that I don't want to end up like my mother, who is angry, bitter, and alone because she has forced everybody out of her world and won't acknowledge that that's what she has done. You know what I mean? Like, and so when I have to acknowledge that, you know, in my 30s, I really screwed up some great opportunities, and it wasn't anybody else's fault, but solidly on mine. So I work every day to not continue that legacy, but at the same time, I've never been married. I've never really been in a very long-term relationship. And so my hardest thing is truth be told, if I'm ever going to be good enough to be loved. Now, one of the things I wanted to say real quick about my art is I do some fun stuff, but you always notice that I always usually have a dandelion in my paintings. And the dandelion is what I feel is the epitome of the survivor. So I use the dandelion as a simile for survival. There's if you look at a dandelion, they'll grow on concrete. You know what I mean? Like, you can't kill these things. Every year they come out with new toxins to try to kill them, and they just thrive even more. And so to me, the dandelion is a symbol of survival because they're pernicious. So when you see my paintings and they look a little whimsical or fun, look for the dandelion, because you're going to see one and it's going to be like, oh, that's still what he's still saying. You're a survivor. He's, you know, and so I have this dandelion push.
It's interesting because obviously in drawing, a lot of people don't realize they do this sort of thing. You do it consciously, so that's interesting. Tell me, what do you?
Well, you know, it's also one of those things where it's also a little homage to the childhood I never had. Yeah. Because, you know, 9 times out of 10, if you ever gave a flower to somebody as a kid, it was probably a dandelion. And if you were ever given a flower by a kid, it was probably a dandelion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it reminds you of innocence and how stubborn that can be and how beautiful it can be. So that's why I put a lot of it in my paintings.
So how are you these days with touch?
Oh, if I don't want you to touch me, I don't want you to touch me. And what I mean by that is, if I'm intimate with somebody, and it's a designated we're intimate, I have no issues. If you're not designated to be the intimate, I have a lot of issues. I still have, I also suffer from body dysmorphic disorder. And I think it's because I was in such great shape at one time, and now I'm not in that same shape, that I'm really self-conscious. But I'm not big on touch. I really, unless I have cued you into that line of, you get to touch me, I don't want you to touch me.
Yeah, I understand that. You like to cook, don't you?
23 years as a chef.
And is that right? That's it. Because you must be good, because I notice you teach others. And I'm trying to think of what it was, the German dish that you, beef stroganoff, was it?
Yep. Well, my chef was a German souffle chef, and so I would learn all these great techniques. And a real quick story, it's kind of funny. So when I started with Giuseppe, for 6 months, Lance, 6 months, I was only allowed to wash, cut, and dry lettuce.
Wow.
8 hours a day. Wash, dry, cut lettuce. That was it. And after the 6 months, he was like, well, you're good to go. Let's get in. And he said it to me. He's like, because if you're willing to put up with that and you have that kind of patience, you'll be a good chef.
I'm just going to give you a quick promo, but then while I do that, you think of your little promo, because it comes your chance. But I'm going to say here, if you're a survivor, yes, if you are a survivor, this is Brian Cardoza, and he needs you. So get in touch and support his project, not for him, but for you. You, because you survived. Share your story. So now your turn. You promo yourself in any way you want.
If you want to know more about me, you can go to briancardoza.com, or you can buy my book at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, The Unexpected Victim, or you can get a hold of me at Survivor Nights, like KNIGHT, like Knights of Old, on Facebook. And on those things, I want people to know this. I don't want to ever be popular because I got raped. I don't want to ever be rich because I was beaten. I don't want any of these things. But what I do want is I want to get in front of people and talk to my fellow survivors. Because the numbers in America, I don't know what they are in New Zealand, but I hear they're actually kind of similar or high. It's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. So that means legitimately, if I get in front of 100 people, Lance, I'm talking to 20 survivors.
Yeah.
And those 20 survivors may have never heard another male survivor get in front of them and say, you can do this. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard. There are going to be times you don't want to wake up and get at it again. But I promise you, if you do it, it will be worth it. And they need to hear that message. So if you can, share my profile, share my book, share my art, share my story. Because there's a kid out there, boy, girl, adult, woman, man, non-identifying, that needs to hear that they can get through it.
Right. So you heard Brian. Now, Brian, what has just come up for me is something you said at the beginning, ask anything, so I will. And I meant to ask this earlier, and so I'll ask it now. Can you tell us about we'll call it the bad time, but that period of for people to understand how you got sold, and what that experience was like for you. Is that a reasonable?
So, yeah. So, just to reiterate the question, so what you're wanting to know is
Want
what
people
it
to know
felt
really
like,
what happened for you.
what it felt like, and what it seemed like, and everything.
Yeah.
So what I what I didn't know at the time was that my mother had convinced my older brother that my father left because and this is the quote, because I couldn't make him love this family. And my brother, who had 4 more years with my dad than I did, really took it personal that like I had screwed up his life, that I had drove his father away because I was such a worthless failure, that now my brother was miserable. So I didn't know this until in 1997. I was out of jail. I just got out of jail, and I went across country on a Greyhound and found my dad, and then lived with my dad for a little bit. What I didn't know was that my brother was already living there, and making up for lost time, I guess. And so we had a conversation, and this is the stuff that I had found out was the reason why when his best friend had exhibited an interest in me, that my brother sold me to him, allowed him, and I'll never forget it. And it's something that it's back to the Thriver thing. I'll never forget the day, because he, my rapist, looked at me and said, so do you want to know what sex is? And, what 6-year-old doesn't want to know, something that an older kid knows? And so I was like, yeah. And so he was like, all right, well, then we'll go upstairs and I'll show you what sex is. And he turned and looked at my brother. My brother smiled, nodded his head, and then walked to the kid's room. And I got led upstairs, thrown on a red bean bag. My feet got tangled in a vacuum cleaner cord. And to this day, I still can't wear flip-flops because I can't stand stuff in between my toes. But yeah, that's what happened. I'll never forget, because it was upstairs and there was a rail. So it was like a lookout. So it went upstairs and it was like a half be upstairs. And I'll never forget, because I grabbed onto one of the rails because of the pain. And that's how it happened. That's
Wow.
That's how I learned at 6 years old what sex was.
Gee, and the you refer to it as, I think, sold to slavery.
Yep.
And that's the.
Yep.
That's it.
So, and that's because my brother had allowed. So I didn't realize that I was sex trafficked until 3 years ago, when a group that was focusing on stopping sex trafficking found out about my story, and they were like, you were sex trafficked, right? I was just like,
wow.
Holy shit.
Yeah, no, I get it now. I get it.
I was, you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And so I didn't realize that until like 3 years ago, that's literally what happened. Like, I was just like, no, I was raped.
I understand that, because a therapist told me, I was on a workshop, I think, or I saw a therapist somewhere or whatever, and I told them a couple of things, and they said, do you realize your brother tried to kill you not once but 3 times, and I've got scars in my head.
Yeah.
I still don't really connect with it, but yes, when I think about it and what he did, yeah. That's the reality.
Well, and my brother tried to kill me quite a few times. and that was during that time frame. I was really the house whipping boy.
I can connect with that. And
Yeah.
tell me, did you say you'd been inside?
I did what?
Did
Oh
you-
yeah, I did a brief stint. I was in a car, and the driver underneath his seat had 3 ounces of crystal meth and a loaded 357. So we all went inside for a little bit, and we all got out, and they ended up dropping the charges on me because they literally had nothing on me. There was no fingerprints on my stuff. There was nothing. So after some time in solitary confinement and all this kind of stuff, they were just like, get out. And they said, get out. And I was just like, good idea. And I left, so, but yeah, no, I spent a little bit of time in jail in solitary and stuff. And that was really the wake up call, Lance. I was relatively clean up to 97. Like, I would do, some coke every once in a while, but was nowhere near as heavy into drugs as I was in the early 90s. But now since that arrest, I have been clean since 1997. I have been sober since 2011. I don't even drink soda. I drink water and 2 cups of coffee in the morning. That's it. I quit smoking in 2010. I've been straight and narrow.
It's amazing. I've been in prison, but I was running a personal growth workshop in a maximum security prison, and I was locked in a room with 15, 20 lifers, with a security bell in my pocket if I wanted to go to the every day for a week I was locked in there, and working with prisoners on personal growth when they're in there for life is murderers and rapists. It's quite a challenge, and it was actually a great experience. And I could see a little bit about what it was like. That short time you were in there, let people hear, what was it like? What was it like? What was your experience of that short period?
So to me, it was kind of funny because, so the cop who busted us was like, he gave the typical, machismo, I'm a cop, you're a citizen thing. He was just like, first who talks walks. And I looked at the officer and I was just like, well, then we're both screwed here. He's like, why? I was like, because I didn't know about the drugs until you guys turned the lights on. And he was just like, really? I was just like, yeah. The driver freaked out, and I was just like, why are you freaking out? And then he told me, and I was like, pull over, and I'm getting out. And when he pulled over to let me out, that's when the cops hit the sirens. So I looked at the cop, and I was like, look, I had nothing to do with this crime. So even if I wanted to tell you something, I can't. I don't. Like, I literally have nothing. I was like, but I'll tell you what. I'm 22 now. I have done so many crimes in my past that we're just going to call this karma. And so he laughed, and I was just like, so just throw the cuffs on, and I'm going to get out because I know I had nothing to do with this. In America, since I'm white, I automatically get privilege. So I was like, I'm good, and so. It was funny because I didn't like it, and I'll tell you one of the things that changed my life was jail, and it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because so you were inside were you inside as an inmate or as a citizen?
Oh, a citizen. I'm a good boy. I've been fortunate, stayed out of trouble. I went in. I was running a workshop for lifers on personal growth, and you can see the humor in that,
Yeah.
But I actually made good friends in there.
Yeah, lifers. When you have nothing left to lose, you have everything to give. Um, so I'm sitting in the, all right, so I'm in my bunk, and it was in Washington, they call it forced isolation. So forced isolation is where you're in a room with two people with two beds, but they just never allow anybody in the room. So you always have like this moment of hope that you're going to eventually have somebody to talk to, and just nobody shows up. So it's even a little bit, I think, in my opinion, a little more cruel. I would rather you just have put me in a room by myself. So I'm doing what you do in jail when you're trying to kill time, and you're laying on the right side. So then the next day you lay on the left side, and it feels like you're in a different place. So I was laying in bed, and I noticed this name, Tim Williams, and it was graffitied on the bottom. I'm like, why would a guy sign his name? You know what I mean? Like, how bored are you? So the next day I'm at the other end of the bunk, and I notice his name again, but looks a little older, like it's deeper under the levels of graffiti. So then, like the day after that, I'm doing the jailhouse pull-ups where you're positioned outside of the bunk, your feet are hanging off the side, and you're doing pull-ups off the top bunk. And I notice his name again. And I'll be honest with you, Lance, for like the first 24 hours, I was like, how bored of a human being it is to write his name in 3 different spots on the same bed. Like, how stupid is this? And then it dawned on me that he wasn't bored, Lance. He had signed it for every time he'd been in that cell. So here was a guy who would get arrested, get put in cell M21, get out, get arrested again, come back, and get put in the same cell, not once, not twice, 3 times. And you know that in between, he'd been in J27 and Z16. And so it dawned on me, like, I am not going to be Tim Williams. I am not coming back to jail. I am not coming back in this system. And since then, Lance, I can honestly say I've had 2 speeding tickets in 21 years.
There's something. Yeah, go on.
No, it's you have an epiphany like that, and if you ignore it, you're the jackass.
Well, just a question. As I said, we had some good connections when I was in there, and at the end of the week, a couple of them wanted me to see their home. This is in a prison, maximum security. Come and see our home. Yeah. And for people who just see prisons and that in movies, etc., you have no idea. It's the difference between watching a game of football on the telly as to actually going to the place. It is fear flows right through the place. For a start.
Oh God, yeah. It's not just the River Nile.
No, and then when we got to their area, they had an area where they can play snooker, and we were shown around. Look, this is the snooker room. There's a couple of guys playing, and you could cut the fear with a knife right in front of your face. It's like, wow. And then they show you the room. So for anybody who thinks, who's not concerned about being in prison, that's a small room. It's tiny.
10 by 6.
It's so tiny.
Yep, 10 foot by 6 foot.
It's incredible. But you don't get that watching a movie. You gotta know it's a scary place. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the problem in America right now, is that too many people have watched too many movies and they all think they're John McClane from a Die Hard series. You know, real life is nowhere near like a movie, and too many of us are in this false world that, you know, you can just do this stuff, and that's just not the way it is. You know, I honestly handled jail. I think the scariest moment for me in jail was I was facing 18 years. And at like day 3, Lance, I was like, I can do 18 years standing on my head. And And it was because, I mean, honestly, I was conditioned from 6 to 15 to handle far worse than what prison could do to me. So I was just like, wait a minute. So I will get 3 square meals a day, medical if I needed, and I never have to worry about the power or lights or heat. We're good, you know? And then I had that epiphany. I was just like, oh no, you know, like there is life outside of here. And here's the irony of this entire thing for me. So I was facing 18 years in 1997. In 2013, 5 years ago, I was at the prison, the local prison, talking to a group of inmates about perspective and the ability to get out and what you have to do to get out and how you need to conduct yourself to not come back. As I'm walking out, Lance, I realize it's October of 2013, which in all honesty would have been 18 years to the month that I was walking out of the prison again.
We sort of done our time, but would you like to try 2 or 3 questions on the potluck?
Yeah, sure.
Anything between 1 and 67?
For some reason, number 33 has been stuck in my head.
Good. We haven't had that one before, so there. How do you make decisions?
So I'm kind of smart. And so I make decisions in a linear fashion. So I try to look at everything that has led me to the decision, like to the point where I have to make a decision. And then I try to find a logical concourse through it to make the right decision. That's how I make decisions on a day-to-day basis. When everything is going chaotic, I really just make snap decisions that end up being right. And I think that's because of 23 years as a chef. When it's feeding time, you don't have time to think. You just have time to either react or I can't think of the other term. You either have a chance to react or be proactive, and you never can tell. So that's how I kind of do it now. If it's everything is hitting the fan, it's whatever feels right. If I have some time to think about it, it's a logical conclusion.
Well, we know today that a lot of one thing it's worth attending to is our diet. What's that like being a chef? What's it like I mean, I'm on the paleo diet, so.
So I'm on the intermittent fasting diet. So what I do now is I don't eat for 20 hours a day. And I've lost, just from doing that, literally just from doing that, I've lost 5 inches in my waist in the last month and a half. The hardest part about being a chef and diet, Lance, is I can make some really good, tasty, healthy food. The worst part is that I also know that if I add this and this and this, it's much better. And when I add this, this, and this, it's no longer healthy. So that's kind of the worst part about it. I developed a food addiction at a very early age because before I figured out what drugs and pot was, I knew that Twinkies and pizza made me feel better. So I've literally been fighting a food addiction probably since I was about 6. And I've had some wins. I've had more losses than wins. But you know, it's still a battle that it's worth fighting.
So another question, 1 to 67.
8.
8. So that's another new one too. You won't believe this. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
In Boston, on Massachusetts Ave, right before it turns, right when it gets to the MIT turn on Massachusetts Ave, the Green Line, there is this Greek pizzeria that this guy makes a meat lover's pizza that'll make you go home and slap your most loved person in the world. It was so perfect. It was just the right amount of meats, the right amount of sauce, the right amount of cheese, the perfect crust. If it was one food for the rest of my life, it would be that Greek pizza on Massachusetts Ave. I can't remember the name of it, but I promise you, if I went back there right now, Lance, you could blindfold me and I'd find it.
But if we said considering health as part of the question, would it change your answer?
Yeah, I think if we were to do a consideration of health, I make a it depends on if you're on a paleo diet, this is good. Or if you're low carb, it's good. I make a dry rub with a bunch of seasonings with no sugar for baby back ribs that cook for about 6 hours, that are just amazing. That would probably be it.
That sounds good for me. Nothing like some good ribs. No. And last question.
So we went 67, we went 8. So, and you said, we know there's 67 questions. We went 33, we went 8. Let's go 51.
I was already moving up there from reading you. 51. Oh, there you go. Nice way to finish off. What does a perfect day look like to you?
A perfect day to me, Lance, would be to have somebody that respects me and loves me, and we go to dinner, and the only table that's available is in the center of the room, and I can sit there without freaking out. Fantastic.
Now, another chance for a quick promo for you, whatever you want to say.
Please, if you can, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, The Unexpected Victim. And I would say this is my promo. If you're hearing this and you have a local rape crisis center in your area, call them, volunteer, donate money, donate clothes, donate children's clothes, do something to let us know, us survivors know, that we're not alone and we're not in this by ourselves.
Great message. Well, my name is Lance Best and I'm in Auckland, New Zealand. I've been speaking with Brian Cardoza, born in Anchorage, Alaska, and now in North Carolina, Louisiana.
No, Newbern, not Louisiana, Newbern.
Newbern. Oh, sorry, Newbern. Yeah, yeah.
Louisiana is a different place.
Yes. Oh, I'm terrible at geography.
Fine, you're in a good spot.
Personally, it's been a privilege to hear Brian, and he's very open, and I'm sure he's going to continue to helping and having an influence on many people's lives. As I always say, I'm always having the last word, and this is about Brian. So now I'll leave the last word to Brian.
There are days that are going to suck, but they're all worth it.